arrived as a Hollywood superstar, dynamic, versatile, and gold dust at the box office. Welcome, please, Mel Gibson.
He stood on the mountaintop of Hollywood, a warrior king who carved his legacy with fire, steel, and a Scottish war cry that shook the world. But behind the legend was a man spiraling into a darkness deeper than any character he ever portrayed. While audiences saw a hero, his private life was collapsing under addiction, rage, and a series of scandals so explosive they nearly erased him from the industry overnight. And even more shocking were the recordings hidden for years, capturing the fury and fear that revealed a side of Mel Gibson few believed could be real. The rare photos and untold truths behind his fall from glory will be uncovered in this video. Stay until the end to understand why Mel Gibson remains one of Hollywood's most brilliant and most haunting tragedies. He was born Mel Columcille Gerard Gibson on January 3rd, 1956 in Peekskill, New York, the sixth of 11 children in a family ruled by strict faith and an uncompromising patriarch. His father, Hutton Gibson, was a hard-edged man whose worldview was forged by fear, loss, and a fierce devotion to traditional Catholicism. His beliefs were so rigid that even within the family, they created a constant pressure, a shadow that would follow Mel into adulthood. In 1968, when Mel was just 12, a seismic event reshaped the course of his entire life. His father suffered a serious work-related injury and lost his job. A lawsuit followed, and when the payout arrived, Hutton made a sudden and dramatic decision. He uprooted the entire family and fled America for Australia, convinced that the country was collapsing morally and politically, and terrified that his sons would be drafted into the Vietnam War. That escape, sudden, forced, and dictated by fear, became Mel's first lesson in how drastically life could change overnight. One moment, he was an everyday American kid. The next, he was a foreign boy thrown into a world he didn't understand. Australia, with its sharp sunlight, rough humor, and fierce schoolyard hierarchies, did not welcome him gently. Mel arrived with an American accent he couldn't hide, and the bullies seized on it immediately. They mocked the way he spoke, the way he dressed, and the way he carried himself. Every morning, he walked into classrooms and hallways where he felt like an outsider, trapped between two identities and embraced by neither. Years later, Mel would describe this period as the time he learned to defend first, speak second. The constant taunts hardened him, cultivating a silent rage that simmered beneath the surface. The charm he would later show on screen had its roots here. It became a shield, a survival tool, a way to disarm those who threatened him. But the pressure at school was nothing compared to the relentless expectations at home. Hutton demanded obedience, discipline, and adherence to faith. His views were uncompromising, his rules absolute. Behind closed doors, the Gibson household lived under a system where questioning authority was seen as rebellion, and rebellion was punished. The children grew up in a world of prayers, routines, and strict doctrines, a world where emotions were tightly locked behind acceptable behavior. Mel's mother offered warmth, but even her gentleness couldn't soften the atmosphere shaped by Hutton's dominance. The children were trained to be tough, controlled, and silent, especially when it came to personal struggles. It was within this environment that Mel learned to suppress, to internalize, and to hide. What the world would later call volatility began here. A boy never allowed to express fear, sadness, or doubt. A boy taught to be strong at all costs. But something else was forming too. In the quiet corners of that strict household, Mel found escape in imagination, watching old movies, mimicking accents, slipping into characters as a way to feel something he couldn't express in real life. Acting was not yet a dream. It was simply a relief, a pressure valve, a hidden door out of the confinement. Few photos from this era exist, but the ones that do show a child torn between innocence and a seriousness beyond his age, eyes that hinted at a storm he didn't yet understand. These images, rarely seen, reveal the early fractured lines of personality that would one day captivate millions and devastate itself. By the time Mel reached his late teens, the boy who once felt powerless was beginning to sense a spark, the stirring of a talent no one yet recognized. But as he stepped closer to his future, the shadows of his upbringing tightened their grip, shaping the man he would soon become. Acting did not call Mel Gibson gently. It pushed him, almost by accident, into a world he never imagined belonging to. In the late 1970s, he was just another young man in Australia trying to find his place in a country that still felt foreign. He worked odd jobs, drifted through routines, and seemed destined for an ordinary life. Nothing in his early path pointed toward Hollywood legend. The turning point arrived because of someone else, his sister. Seeing something in him he couldn't yet see in himself, she submitted an application to the National Institute of Dramatic Art, NIDA, one of the most prestigious acting schools in the Southern Hemisphere. Without telling him, when he received the acceptance letter, he was stunned. Mel had never considered acting as a serious path, but curiosity outweighed fear. Stepping into NIDA was like entering a furnace. The school was known for breaking students down and rebuilding them. Its instructors were relentless, demanding emotional honesty and technical precision. Among Mel's classmates was Judy Davis, a young woman destined for her own greatness. They challenged each other, clashing at times, pushing each other further at others. Mel discovered something unexpected, a raw, instinctive talent that teachers describe as both explosive and magnetic. But Mel's journey at NIDA was far from smooth. He struggled with discipline, often arriving exhausted, distracted, or disheveled. Beneath the surface, he still carried the restless anger and emotional turbulence of his childhood. It made him unpredictable, but it also made him unforgettable. On stage, he could shift from wounded vulnerability to fierce intensity in a heartbeat. People began to whisper that he had it, the undefinable spark that separates performer from a star. Then came the moment that would change everything. Just days before the audition for a low-budget action film titled Mad Max, Mel got into a brutal bar fight. He showed up to the casting call with a swollen face, bruised cheekbones, and cuts across his nose. He looked more like a man who had survived an apocalypse than someone auditioning for a movie, and the director loved it. They didn't even let him read lines. They told him to come back when the bruises healed. When he returned weeks later, looking like himself again, they cast him immediately, not for his injuries, but for the fire in his eyes. George Miller saw something dangerous, something unpolished, something real. And that was exactly what the world needed for a futuristic outlaw in a broken wasteland. Mad Max 1979 exploded far beyond expectations, turning a small Australian production into a global phenomenon and launching Mel Gibson into international attention. Overnight, the bullied child with the accent that didn't fit became a rising star with a face the whole world wanted to see. Success brought opportunity, and opportunity brought pressure. Roles in films like Gallipoli, 1981, revealed that Mel was far more than an action hero. He could deliver emotional depth, tragedy, and conviction. Directors admired his intensity. Co-stars admired his fearlessness. But behind the charm and charisma, the old volatility lingered, simmering like an ember waiting for oxygen. By the time he finished the early stages of his career, Mel had already built a reputation. Brilliant, unpredictable, and carrying a darkness he never fully controlled. The world saw talent, but those closest to him saw something else. A storm building, waiting for the right moment to break. The path to fame had begun, but the shadows were walking beside him. By the mid-1980s, Mel Gibson was no longer an Australian breakout talent. He was becoming one of Hollywood's new titans. His rise was meteoric, the kind reserved for stars whose presence shifts the industry. And with Lethal Weapon in 1987, everything changed. As Martin Riggs, a grieving, unstable police officer with a death wish, Mel didn't just act, he detonated. Audiences were stunned by his fusion of charm, humor, and raw emotional pain. For many, it was the first glimpse of his own inner turbulence bleeding through the screen. The film was a massive success, and the franchise catapulted him into the global spotlight. Suddenly, Mel Gibson wasn't just famous. He was a brand, a symbol of masculinity, intensity, and danger. Hollywood responded accordingly. Offers poured in, each bigger than the last. Tequila Sunrise, Bird on a Wire, Air America, Hamlet. He navigated effortlessly between action, drama, comedy, and Shakespeare, an almost unheard-of versatility for an actor of his era. But the defining moment of his ascent came in 1995 with Braveheart. It was an impossible dream, a massive historical epic, directed by a man with only one feature film behind him. Studios doubted him. Executives whispered that he was taking on too much. But Mel pushed forward, driven by something deeper than ambition, a hunger to prove himself, and perhaps to outrun the darker parts of his past. On set, he was intense, demanding, and relentless. Cast and crew described 90-hour work weeks, freezing cold locations in Scotland and Ireland, and battle scenes that swallowed entire days. But within the chaos, Mel shone. His vision was clear, his determination absolute. He wasn't just directing, he was commanding, like a general leading troops into war. The result was a cinematic thunderclap. Braveheart won 5 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director, placing Mel Gibson among the few actors in history to conquer Hollywood both in front of and behind the camera. For a moment, he stood at the summit, applauded by critics, adored by fans, and protected by a mythic image built on courage, intensity, and charm. Behind that image, a different reality was unfolding. Mel's public persona was sculpted perfection: a devoted husband to Robin Moore, a father of 7, a man of faith, a disciplined professional. The media portrayed him as balanced, grounded, and heroic, the antithesis of Hollywood's chaos. But what the cameras didn't capture were the cracks. Behind closed doors, the pressure of fame began to squeeze the unresolved turbulence he'd carried since childhood. The drinking increased. Arguments at home became more frequent. The emotional volatility that once fueled his performances now threatened to consume him. Hollywood saw the polished star, but those closest to him started to sense a growing instability. Friends recounted moments where Mel would shift from warmth to rage in seconds. Some called it stress. Others whispered there was something far darker, a man fighting demons he refused to name. In rare behind-the-scenes photos from this era, Mel's smile sometimes appeared strained, his eyes distant, as if he were playing a role even when the cameras weren't rolling. During interviews, he would laugh, joke, and charm, yet there were flickers, quick, almost invisible, when a mask slipped, revealing exhaustion, tension, or something unresolved beneath the surface. He was celebrated, but he was also cornered by the expectations of being flawless. And as the spotlight grew brighter, the shadows behind him grew larger. Mel Gibson was at the peak of his career, living a life most actors could only dream of. But as history has shown again and again in Hollywood, the higher the ascent, the more catastrophic the fall. And his fall would be unlike anything the industry had seen in decades. Success had given Mel Gibson everything: glory, wealth, power, and artistic authority, but also awakened every unresolved fracture inside him. By the late 1990s, the cracks that once hid beneath fame began widening into fault lines that no public image could contain. At first, the darkness crept in quietly, a drink to settle his nerves, a drink to unwind, a drink to sleep. But the drinks multiplied, turning one evening ritual into a daily dependence. Those close to him noticed the transformation: the way his voice changed when alcohol took over, the sudden shift in mood, the flashes of anger that appeared without warning. Mel wasn't drinking for pleasure. He was drinking to disappear, to silence the storms that his childhood discipline had taught him never to name. Behind the glamorous facade of red carpets and magazine covers, Mel's home life was coming undone. The Gibson marriage, long praised as a Hollywood anomaly for its stability, was buckling under pressure. Raising 7 children while maintaining an A-list career left little room for vulnerability. When Mel felt cornered by expectations, by stress, by himself, rage became his instinctive escape. Arguments grew sharper. The walls of the family home, once a sanctuary, absorbed the tremors of a relationship that was collapsing in slow motion. Meanwhile, Hollywood began to sense that something was wrong. Reports circulated of Mel snapping at crew members, disappearing into his trailer with bottles, or arriving on set looking exhausted after long nights of drinking. His charm could still light up a room, but the warmth wasn't consistent anymore. Sometimes it flickered, sometimes it vanished entirely. And then came the incident that shifted everything from rumor to undeniable truth. July 28, 2006. Malibu, a night that would become one of the most infamous moments in Hollywood history. Mel was pulled over for speeding, intoxicated far beyond the legal limit. What should have been a routine arrest spiraled into a catastrophic meltdown. Officers later described his behavior as explosive, unpredictable, and deeply troubling. The arrest report, eventually leaked, revealed a torrent of anti-Semitic and hateful remarks that shocked even those familiar with Mel's volatility. It wasn't just a drunken rant. It was a rupture, violent, public, and irreversible. When the story hit the press, the reaction was immediate. Studios distanced themselves within hours. Longtime collaborators issued statements of disappointment. The industry that once worshipped him now turned its back completely. Hollywood had forgiven many sins, but the scandal ignited a firestorm unlike anything the town had seen since the downfall of its legendary figures. And the images that surfaced afterward only intensified the damage. Mel with unfocused eyes during booking, Mel shielding his face leaving a facility, Mel walking alone to his car looking empty, hollow, exhausted. Each photo became a piece of evidence in the narrative the world was eager to believe, that the hero had been a monster all along. This was the beginning of his fall, but it was not the bottom. Far darker storms were still ahead. The fallout from the 2006 arrest should have been the lowest point of Mel Gibson's life. But the truth is, it was only the beginning of a collapse that would stretch nearly a decade, one where every attempt to stand up was met with another blow pushing him further down. As Hollywood severed ties, Mel retreated into isolation. For the first time in his career, there were no scripts waiting for him, no studio meetings, no premieres. The man who once commanded entire armies on screen and entire studios off-screen now found himself alone, drowning in consequences he had created but could no longer control. During this period, the drinking worsened. Friends drifted away. Some feared enabling him. Others feared confronting him. And without work to ground him, Mel's emotional volatility escalated. He was a man pacing inside a cage built from guilt, shame, and unresolved trauma, trapped between the person he had been and the person the world now believed he was. Then, in 2009, after nearly 30 years of marriage, the separation from Robin Moore became official. The divorce settlement, over $425 million, was a financial earthquake, but the emotional toll was far greater. Robin had been the one person who grounded him, the anchor that kept him from drifting too far into his darker impulses. Without her presence, Mel's world became dangerously unbalanced, and the darkness deepened. In 2010, the scandal that would reshape his legacy erupted. The recordings. Leaked audio captured Mel in the most vulnerable and destructive state of his life. Angry, frightened, intoxicated, unraveling. The world listened in disbelief as his voice, once celebrated in iconic roles, trembled with rage, panic, and despair. Every second of those recordings became a weapon used against him, replayed on news channels, mocked on late-night shows, analyzed by commentators who treated his private breakdown as entertainment. Mel Gibson was no longer just controversial. He became a global cautionary tale. Hollywood's reaction bordered on absolute exile. Directors who once praised him now rejected him. Agencies removed his name from their rosters. Journalists treated him as a symbol of self-destruction. Even some friends, unsure how to defend him, stayed silent. For the next several years, Mel existed in a strange limbo, neither forgiven nor forgotten. He was visible but unwelcome, alive but creatively dead. This period produced some of the most haunting images associated with him. Photos of Mel walking alone with a gray beard and tired eyes. Mel outside grocery stores looking disoriented. Mel sitting at bars with a stare that seemed to look to the world, not at it. Photos of him attending Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, head lowered, shoulders heavy. Each rare image was a snapshot of a man wrestling with the parts of himself he had avoided his entire life. But beneath the chaos, something unexpected began forming. An attempt at accountability. Mel sought treatment, leaned on faith, and began rebuilding relationships with his children. Quietly, without cameras, he started facing the demons he had ignored since childhood. Still, the question lingered in Hollywood. Could a man this destroyed ever return? Was there even a path back for someone whose fall had been so public, so violent, and so unforgiving? For a decade, the answer seemed to be no. But Mel Gibson's story had one more twist. One that no one in Hollywood believed possible. For almost 10 years, Mel Gibson lived in the margins of the world he once dominated. Hollywood had closed its gates. Studios avoided his name. Red carpets no longer welcomed him. What remained was a man navigating the wreckage of his own making, forced to confront every demon he had spent decades outrunning. But within that silence, something shifted. The first turning point came not from Hollywood, but from Mel himself. After the destructive cycle of the late 2000s, he began seeking help, quietly, without cameras, without press. Friends who stayed by his side described a man determined to understand the root of his anger, his addictions, and the emotional scars that had shaped him since childhood. Therapy, sobriety programs, spiritual guidance. Slowly, he rebuilt the foundations of the self he had never truly examined. He also began repairing relationships with his children. For years, they had witnessed the collapse of their family, the public humiliation and the backlash. Rebuilding trust required patience, humility, and time. And Mel, for the first time in his life, seemed willing to slow down long enough to face the pain rather than drown it. Still, no amount of personal healing changed one brutal fact. Hollywood did not want him back. He was still the symbol of a meltdown the world refused to forget. But then came the second turning point. An unlikely hand reaching out. Producers Randall Wallace and Bill Mechanic believed Mel still had a voice worth hearing. They approached him quietly, without fanfare, offering a chance to direct a World War II biographical film about Desmond Doss, a medic who saved dozens of men without carrying a weapon. The story was powerful, spiritual, sacrificial, everything Mel connected with on a personal level. Yet, when studios heard Mel's name, they recoiled. Several investors pulled out. Some actors refused to join. The fear of backlash was so strong that the project nearly collapsed before filming even began. But Mel didn't walk away. Not this time. He fought. For the first time since Braveheart, he was driven not by ego or ambition, but by necessity, a need to prove he was more than his worst moments, a need to create something that mattered, a need to rise from the ashes he had been buried under. Quietly, through persistence and sheer force of will, he built a cast, secured financing, and began filming what would become Hacksaw Ridge 2016. On set, the crew described a different Mel, a man calmer, more focused, humbled by years of silence. He listened more than he spoke. He pushed hard, but apologized when he pushed too far. There were no drunken outbursts, no chaos behind scenes. Only the work, the art, the discipline that had once made him one of Hollywood's most compelling storytellers. When the film premiered, critics expected controversy. What they didn't expect was brilliance. Hacksaw Ridge earned a 10-minute standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival. It received 6 Academy Award nominations, including Best Director from Mel Gibson. For the first time in a decade, Hollywood said his name was something other than disdain. This was not a full redemption, nor a full forgiveness. Many still questioned him. Many still refused to work with him. But the narrative had changed. Mel Gibson was no longer just a man from the 2006 arrest, or the voice in the recordings. He was a complex figure, flawed, wounded, brilliant, who had clawed his way back with a film about humanity, sacrifice, and redemption. And perhaps that was the most cinematic twist of his life. The man nearly destroyed by his own darkness had returned by telling the story of a man who chose light over violence. But even with this resurgence, the question remained, what kind of life awaited Mel Gibson after the storm? And what legacy would he leave behind? Even after Hacksaw Ridge reintroduced Mel Gibson to the world, the path ahead was not one of triumph. It was one of quiet recalibration. Hollywood did not suddenly forget nor forgive the decade of scandals that had defined his fall. But the industry shifted from absolute rejection to cautious distance, recognizing that his artistry remained undeniable, even if his past remained unforgiven. In the years that followed, Mel continued to work, but not with the force of his former glory. The age of blockbuster domination was behind him. Instead, he gravitated towards smaller films, character-driven roles, and independent projects where expectations were lower and judgment less severe. He appeared in gritty thrillers, directed smaller-scale works, and collaborated with filmmakers willing to see him beyond the headlines. Yet the real transformation occurred away from the cameras. Friends describe a man calmer than ever before, still sharp, still intense, but softened by age and humbled by experience. Sobriety became a commitment rather than a trial. His relationship with his younger children deepened, and he rebuilt fractured bonds with older ones. The explosive volatility that once defined him faded into something quieter, almost reflective. Photographs from this era show a different Mel, a face lined by time, a beard flecked with gray, eyes no longer burning with rage but dimmed by acceptance. He seemed smaller, not physically, but in presence, like a man who has stepped away from the center of the world voluntarily. Some images show him attending church, holding his infant child, or walking slowly through parking lots with a distant look, as if measuring the distance he has traveled from the height of fame to the edges of normalcy. As for his legacy, it remains one of Hollywood's most complicated. On one side is the undeniable genius, Braveheart, The Passion of the Christ, Apocalypto, Hacksaw Ridge, films that shaped global cinema, shifting conversations, provoking emotion, inspiring both admiration and controversy. His work as an actor and director has influenced entire generations, cementing him as one of the most talented storytellers of his era. On the other side is the darkness, the scandals, the rage, the addiction, the pain inflicted on others, the side that made him a symbol of self-destruction, a reminder that brilliance does not excuse brokenness. To some, he remains a cautionary tale. To others, a misunderstood genius. To many, a man forever caught between his own demons and his undeniable gift. What is certain is that Mel Gibson's life defies simple narratives. It is not a story of rise and fall, nor one of redemption alone. It is a mosaic of contradictions, heroic and tragic, luminous and shadowed, powerful and painfully human. And in the end, that complexity may be his true legacy, a reminder that the icons we worship are often the ones fighting the hardest battle behind closed doors. In the dim light of his later years, Mel Gibson stands not as the untouchable warrior audiences once believed him to be, but as a man etched by battle scars, some earned, some self-inflicted. His life is a reminder that talent can lift a person to impossible heights, yet unresolved pain can pull them down with equal force. Hollywood crowned him, condemned him, and cautiously welcomed him back. But the truth of the story exists somewhere in between. A man capable of greatness, undone by the very shadows he never learned to face. And maybe that is why his legacy lingers so powerfully. It is not polished. It is not simple. It is not clean. It is a portrait of brilliance tangled with flaws, of triumph colliding with torment. Proof that behind every legend is a human being carrying battles unseen. As the lights fade and the screen darkens, one question remains. How much of man's destiny is shaped by the world around him? And how much is shaped by the demons he carries within?